Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Safety Actions November webinar. Today, we are going to be talking through our November newsletter with you. If you haven't already read a copy, you can download the newsletter from the Handouts tab on the GoToWebinar dashboard. And let me introduce Gary, CEO of Safety Action. Gary's going to be reading the news to you today. Gary's going to answer the question, should we get rid of ladders, which is a good question, and explore how well your emergency plan will actually hold up in a real emergency. Gary shares some news about a fine for creating false safety records. And Gary, you're going to tell us what's the difference between a safety fence and a perimeter fence, and also tell us a safety alert involving a fatal accident with an unsafe imported pump. Over to you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and welcome once again, everyone. Before I kick off, if anyone's here this morning who tuned in last month, firstly, apologies for our delay. It was over 5 minutes for us to solve a technical glitch, but I seem to have control of my slides this morning. So hopefully you can see what we're going to cover. So Andrea's outlined that. So let's just turn to the first topic. And much of the topics that we deal with in our newsletter, as those who know us well at Safety Action know, we try and make the complex simple, and we try and answer those questions out there that keep cropping up. People tell me, as a safety engineer of over 30 years, oh, you're not allowed to do this. The laws now tell us we've got to do that. And often we find it's actually not correct. So let's just have a look. So I came across this article, we should be getting rid of ladders. So what we do know is that ladders are one of the most useful tools that we have in the workplace and at home as well. But unfortunately, thousands of people fall from ladders every year, both at home and at work, and some seriously injured and even some fatalities. And so if you're interested in particularly workplace safety, people say, well, therefore, we should get rid of them because clearly ladders are dangerous. And I don't think anyone disputes that ladders are dangerous in the sense that we get people at height and we know that there are serious injuries. So let's just have a look at the legal requirements first. So people say, because of the 2-meter falls prevention rule, therefore, which is essentially in each jurisdiction under the construction regs or falls prevention regulations, you're not to expose someone to a risk of a fall of 2 meters or more without protection, and that's generally harness or handrail. So that's the general precaution. So people say, therefore, ladders taller than 2 meters must be illegal. So let's just have a quick look. What you would see if, or I'll talk you through it because you may not have the newsletter at your fingertips. What we explained was the falls prevention regulations say that there is under the hierarchy of control, if you can do the job from the ground, then that's how you should do it first. So that should be your first choice. So in shopping centres, we're now seeing people changing light bulbs with long poles with suction cups, with rotating screw-in lights instead of the old fluorescent tubes, which you can't do from the ground, replacing light bulbs even up to 2 stories high with very long extendable poles. That's an example, is if you can do the job from the ground, don't go up at heights. The next option is, can we do it from solid construction? So that's scaffolding. We could build scaffolding, put that up, and yes, we can do it, but we won't do that for temporary jobs. There's passive fall prevention and safety harnesses, so two different things here. So the usual safety harness, or we're going to work from a ladder. So what you can see out of the options I've just outlined is that the use of ladders is our least preferred. And so how we should now see ladders is that traditionally they were considered a work platform. So most tradies, workers in factories, and you and I at home treated our ladder as a work platform. So we painted ceilings from ladders. We do various jobs from ladders. That's what we do. So how we should now see it is ladders are not a work platform, but merely a means to get to a work area. and that work area then needs to be safe. So you'll then have harness or handrails at whatever that work area is. So in short, we say this is not about eliminating ladders. It's about seeking safer options. And you've only got to go to places like Bunnings and many other businesses, and you'll find ladders on wheels that are like a staircase with handrails, and they've got a work platform at the top. Some have gates or a safety bar as well. So you can work on a flat platform, and you can have two hands. And remember, the essential safety rule for ladders, you can't do a job that requires two hands. And the reason being is you need 3 points of contact, 1 hand, 2 feet, or 2 hands, 1 foot. That's how you go up a ladder. So if the job requires 2 hands, you can't do that from a ladder. We have to go to a work platform, then we can do that job, whether that be a scissor lift, cherry picker, scaffold, or simply getting onto a roof when we're in a safe work position. So that's the first topic, if you like. Should we get rid of ladders? So yes, they're dangerous. Let's consider what other safe options are there and available to us. And of course, don't forget training for people that are using ladders, particularly in the workplace, for the correct setup and usage of them. And if you're looking for other fact sheets to support this article, give us an email or a call. We have a couple of fact sheets that support this on how it's safe use of ladders. So this next topic is an interesting one that came from my colleague, Steve Webber, who explained about an emergency situation in a client. They had a very good plan, or certainly it appeared to be a very good plan, and every competent business has an emergency plan. They look good and they make people feel good. And what Steve said to me, however, in this particular case, when a real emergency arose, the emergency plan was not worth the paper it was written on. It wasn't trying to be derogatory of the business or their intent, but it was actually the lack of foresight. And so one example that you might find now of recent times, during the recent COVID restrictions, we have in many businesses greatly reduced staff on site. And but the emergency could still happen on site, whether that be a gas leak, a spillage, chemical spillage leak, or fire could still occur. But do you have the right staff or enough staff to implement the plan? So I think this is an example of this. And we deal with a number of leading companies, and they, particularly the better ones, would have an annual crisis management exercise every year, and some separate or combined business continuity exercise for the business. And over time, they develop skills, knowledge, and they stress test not just the plan, but their resources and the knowledge of the people and their reaction by increasingly developing challenging scenarios. So this is what we recommend you do. So you'll have an emergency plan. What you should be doing with, particularly with the executive team, say a crisis management exercise each year, come up with a scenario that will challenge the team, challenge your emergency personnel, and possibly technical staff. If this were to happen, what would we do? How would we go about it? And can we come up with answers quickly? And the scenario might include, well, by the way, we've got WorkSafe at the front gate, and we've got newspapers looking for a quote, and we've got key stakeholders and your senior managers offsite phoning you right now for an answer to find out what the situation is and what you're going to do to fix it. So what we find is when you write an emergency plan, they always look good, and they're written in good faith. But what they don't often accommodate is the pressure of time and the stress on people when it actually occurs. They will find they've got not one, not two, possibly 3, 4, 5 contravening or challenging things that they need to address or answer simultaneously. And I think they're the things that are often missed in emergency planning. So you need redundancy, you need to be able to scale this back or scale it up as needed. So there's our little tip. So look to stress test your emergency plans. You need to engage executives at a high level, and you need to engage your emergency response team at a lower practical level, and they could be separate exercises. And that's what we'd recommend in relation to emergency planning. I thought this next article was particularly interesting to me. I've long appreciated that falsifying company records is both illegal and, in most competent companies, a sackable offence to falsify company records. So this particular case involved a Queensland supervisor. He narrowly avoided a jail term, and the maximum fine for that case was a $70,000 fine. And he came out with a much lower fine in the end. But let's just look at what happened in the circumstances and maybe what the lesson is for us. The supervisor, I think in his mind, innocently allowed a new worker who was a young worker, I think from memory about 20 years old, to see the safety induction answers, and certified him as competent on an excavator and a loader, which was what this new young worker's job was to operate a loader and excavator at the site, but didn't bother to observe him operating any of the equipment, but signed him off. So you might think, yes, the supervisor's wrong, but it seems relatively innocent. You know, he seemed to be struggling. Oh, here's the answers. You know, don't worry about this. No one fails the safety induction. Here's the answers, or if you're a bit confused, and I'm sure you're okay operating the excavator and loader. So there's presumption. I think he's probably a nice guy. He just thought he was being friendly with somebody, but didn't understand the real legal duty and importance of being a supervisor and what they're really there for. And tragically, the same young excavator operator died in an accident at that site 3 weeks after the induction. And that's where this investigation has come from, to find out about this. So the supervisor had falsified those company records. And as I've said, it's been long considered a serious offence in most competent companies. And so really, what's the lesson out of this? I actually believe, and we find this consistently in industry, that many businesses, you all understand training and safety training, but I still don't think it's really sunk in how much more training and skill and how much reliance you have on frontline supervisors. I feel for frontline supervisors. They're under a lot of pressure, incredible pressure, every single day to keep the operations going, keep it happening, keep everyone happy in their team, keep their boss happy and other stakeholders, and quality of the work, timing of the work delivery. They're doing this all the time. The pressures, in my mind, are enormous, and do not underestimate what support and training your supervisors deserve and should get. So to my mind, that's the lesson out of this particular case. So yes, he did the wrong thing. He's falsified records, and that's totally unacceptable. But what I see out of this is that there are thousands and thousands of frontline supervisors all around Australia, New Zealand and elsewhere, and they're inadequately equipped and trained to do the job that the company expects of them. So what we should be doing is maybe just review that. One of the things we do here at Safety Action, some of you will know, is what we call safety leadership training, and it's looking to strengthen the traditional straightforward technical safety training with leadership training, so they understand their legal obligations, they understand how to motivate and communicate with workers, and the things they should be doing and not doing. And what underpins everything you do or don't do is, what are your values? And if you don't have clear values, then he would falsify company records, because obviously his value isn't that I will do honest recording of everything I do. So if that's not a fundamental value that's been embedded in the business, then this will actually start to follow through. We've seen this in the banks, and there's that old saying, you know, the fish rots from the head first. So I'm not that quick to jump down to a supervisor and say, he's falsified records, although this has been shown as a fact in this case. The question is, what else is this company, what pressures have the managers and the business put on those supervisors over a long period of time, and what have they demonstrated is their values of this business, because values underpin every decision you make. When you make a decision, it's your personal values and beliefs that actually underpins whether it's right or wrong, because I can't tell you every single rule, although we try and have lots of safety rules in business. But so that's what I got out of that simple little recent legal case out of Queensland, but it could apply to any state. And one of the key articles this last month was, what's the difference between a safety fence and a perimeter fence? And you might wonder, why do I need to know? What's the difference? Well, let's answer the question up front first, and I'll give you the details. So number one, get this clear in your mind, a perimeter fence protects property. A perimeter fence protects property. And safety fences protect people. So now, when you're asking, is this a perimeter fence, or do I need a perimeter fence or a safety fence? It's actually quite clear. Am I looking to protect property, or am I looking to protect people? So if it's to protect property, what I can tell you is that for most businesses and sites, they have a perimeter fence. That's to stop burglars stealing property and getting in and damaging or interfering with any of the things on the business side. But for the most part, perimeter fences are not a legal requirement. So if I had a business and there was no undue hazards on my site when I finish work at the end of the day and site's unattended. So if the site is inherently safe, there is no legal requirement for a perimeter fence. So, and you'll find many businesses, particularly out in the country, have no fence around their operations. When they go home, they just shut the equipment down and lock the doors at the office or the building, and they go home. And that's not a breach. So ask yourself once again, is this fence to protect property and theft, or is it to protect people? So there's generally no legal requirement for a perimeter fence. Therefore, how high they are, people say, oh, do they have to have barbed wire at the top? Do I have to have razor wire? Can I have an electric fence? Well, you're going a bit over the top unless you have some real reason for such a fence. And the answer is no. You could have a waist height fence, just like a garden fence or one out in the country to keep sheep in, could be the perimeter fence for a property. But if you've got hazards within your property, now it becomes a safety fence. So now when we leave the site unattended, the fence would now have become a safety fence because there's something on your property which would be dangerous even to, if you like, young intruders, like young naughty boys who might jump over the fence and get in at night. So now it needs to be a safety fence, and safety fences are prescribed under the regulations as to the fact that they require the safety fence, and you go to the relevant Australian standard, and that will tell you the details of what that safety fence should contain. So bear with me, I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. So a safety fence would be at least at least 1.6 metres high if there's machinery hazards. Most people, you'll notice in the photograph on this slide, fence about 2 metres high, panels probably about 1.8, and it's on posts or that actually elevate a little bit. So a typical 2 metre high fence is fairly standard as a perimeter fence, but the machine guarding regulations specify at least 1.6. No gap under the fence is not to exceed 180 millimetres, so bear with me, about that much. That's to stop people climbing in underneath. So that's for the reason for that. No holes or frame on the outside of the fence that would make it too easy for someone to climb over. Nothing stored too close to the fence that people climb on the storage and jump over your fence, so maybe at least a metre gap from the fence. And the gate either locked at night, or if it's frequent access into a safety area, you'll have interlock gates. So that's the essence of of a safety fence. And now you know the perimeter fences protect property, safety fences protect people. If it's protecting people, it is prescribed by regulation and Australian standards as to the features, but a perimeter fence is not prescribed. You'll see all types of perimeter fences of all heights and styles, and decorative or not, and that's their choice. So if you want to know more, we have fact sheets on guarding of machinery, and we also have a fact sheet on that very same topic that we're talking about here. So our final topic for today is unsafe imported pump kills. And in this particular case, it was an online pump importer. Bear with me, I'll just turn the page. Imported pumps, as it happened, from China. So probably no great surprise, China is probably the major manufacturer for the world these days. So it's an online pump importer, and the importer and the director were fined. They appealed against that fine and they were refined. So this is what this case is about, and I'll come to the so they originally fined $1.2 million, so a fairly substantial fine. But let's just have a look at what the case was and then how we came back around to the revised penalty. So what the court case found, also the incident involved a lady at her home touched the casing of a submersible pump and was electrocuted. So this is a tragic accident. The investigation found the pumps were of poor quality. So this was evident, and expert witnesses on quality of pumps and quality control gave evidence these are poor quality pumps. It was evidenced by wiring inside the pumps had been tangled and mislaid and could easily be either broken off or damaged. So that was quite clear. The pumps didn't meet Australian standards, but the importer said, oh, but I was assured they met the European standard. Well, guess what? If you want to have pumps that meet the European standard, you're welcome to go to Europe, because then you'll be in the right jurisdiction for a pump that meets European standards. So it's quite silly in Australia to say, but I meet European standards, when what you're meant to have met is Australian standards. Now, increasingly, thankfully, Australian standards are now starting to mirror European standards. So increasingly we're seeing ISO international standards being referenced in Australia, and this is good, which means our work here in Australia is a lot easier to ensure that things are safe and compliant. But simply don't, the courts found that the import business did not do enough due diligence to ensure that its pumps were, one, safe, of adequate quality for what they were meant to do and safe, and they just simply said, oh, but I was assured they met European standards. I'll remind you of an article in our newsletter back in April of 2019 and also January of this year. We reminded you, okay, increasingly we are seeing the CE mark on equipment and machinery, and it actually is not certified European certification in many cases, but in fact China engineered, so in fact, or China export. So China manufacturers are increasingly using this CE mark that looks almost identical, and on its own you cannot tell the difference. So you need to, if you see the CE mark, that's not even a guarantee it meets the European standards, because they're actually putting the CE mark on it. So in essence, out of this case, it was clear to the courts that the importer could not just rely on verbal statements that it meets the European standard, but in fact, the importer has their own duty to do their own risk assessment and verify that it meets Australian standards, which would include AS3000, which is the electrical wiring code here in Australia. So they were originally fined $1.2 million back in 2019, and on appeal, even though it's found that they were still guilty, the fine was reduced to $250,000 for the company and $50,000 for the director. So once again, shows the importance. Obviously, this director had direct involvement in the selection of the pumps and the supplying them into the Australian market. and the courts concluded it wasn't just company negligence, but of that director. So he's got a personal fine, which he will need to pay himself. And I'm sure you would know the company can't just pay that out, even though that person is a director. If it is shown to be the case, they could have further liabilities. So just to finish up, because we like to run these monthly webinars, quick, bright and breezy, to just give you a quick run through the key events and articles we had in our previous newsletter. On our website, we have a thing called blogs or blog articles. You generally just scroll down to the bottom of the front page of our website, or at the top of the entry, you can see blogs. Occasionally, our IT people tell us, gee, what's been the most popular visited topics on your website? You may have an interest. The difference between a JSA and a SWIMS, if you don't know, but you need to know, you can look that up. Do I need a rigger, or is a dogman okay? So they both involve working with cranes, but which one do I need? Andrea, some time ago for a conference, wrote an article on what is a risk assessment. So we all think we know, but Andrea pointed out there's a number of things you may or may not include in your risk assessment, which we believe would actually make it a valid risk assessment, and where to display evacuation signs. So we know we've got evacuation signs, but Andrea outlines in that blog article by state what are the requirements. And as usual, every state is a little bit different. So we still don't have harmonised laws or standards yet. Trip and fall hazards. I did quite a bit of research a few years ago on trips, falls, injuries, and it's quite staggering that the number of people killed from trip and falls exceeds shark attack, bushfires and cyclones every year. Isn't that interesting? But we all focus on bushfires, shark attacks and whatever. Slip, trip, falls is still killing more Australians every year than all of those combined. And there's an article on pre-start meeting tips there as well. So next month, can we give away old machinery? So here we're talking about, it's old machinery. I don't want to pay money to do it up, but it may not meet the current safety regulations or guarding regulations. Can I give it away, or can I sell it? And if so, what are the requirements? Steve outlines bushfire asbestos risk, and of course we'll give you the latest safety news we have at hand as well. Just before we wrap up, because we're coming up to our appointed time, I'll just turn to Andrea. Have we got any questions that we needed to address now before we wrap up, Andrea?
No, Gary, no questions today. You must have answered all those for us.
Okay, well, with that, we're coming right up to the 10:30. As said, we like to keep it to 20 minutes, 30 minutes maximum for our monthly update for you. If you have a question later, feel free on our website, we've got room, or just call us, email in anytime, or respond here. And we look forward to catching you next month, which will be I'll just go find where it is. 10 a.m. Tuesday, the 8th of December is our next and last update webinar for 2020. And we all look forward to a bright and breezy 2021, because we've had a really weird 2020 year. So hopefully we'll catch you in the December webinar before the end of the year. So thank you, Andrea, for coordinating, and thanks for everyone for attending and taking the time. Thank you, and bye.